This is Focus on Your Health on the KJAZ Radio Network. It's brought to you by Kingman Regional Medical Center in historic Kingman, Arizona. I'm T.G. LaFredo, and I took over Focus on Your Health in October of 2013. Since then, I've been hauling microphones pretty much everywhere I go. I've talked to a lot of people, I've learned a lot, and I've had a great time doing it. So I thought we'd wrap up 2014 by revisiting some favorite moments from the show. Think of this as best of part one. We'll start with an excerpt from an interview I did with my pal, Cowboy Dr. Ken Jackson. In this clip, he talks about his first placement out of medical school. He was working in the White Mountains of eastern Arizona.
On the reservation, we were like on the frontier. When I first came there were 5 of us that were serving about 10,000 White Mountain Apaches, and it was the nearest trauma center was 200 miles away. We had no surgery. I delivered both my kids on that reservation, and if anything would have, gone south during that, which it almost did, but the first one, my son, he got stuck, and I had to do a mid-forceps delivery on him, and then I had to transfuse my wife because she was bleeding out, and that's stuff I wouldn't sign up for today. Believe me. I would. But there, I was the best person to do it, and we were literally on the frontier.
And you had no choice but to get it right.
That is right. I mean, for all those things, I can remember like a woman coming in one evening that had fallen off the back of a pickup truck and had scalped herself, and you could lift off her scalp. She was alert. She was drunk but alert. You could lift up her scalp, and there was a asphalt strip dug into her skull. We took care of her there. Yeah. I picked all that asphalt out of there with some forceps, and then put a water pick in there full of betadine and water, and irrigated everything out of there, and then closed it up again. And it was because it was right at the hairline, it was cosmetically a great,
really clean job.
And this was a very attractive young woman.
Yeah,
and it was a very clean job. But we had things like that, yeah. and a lot of infectious disease, and you learned on the job.
Right.
And then I went to Pinetop Lakeside, where there were basically there were almost no specialists there. When I first got there were no general surgeons, there were no orthopedic surgeons.
Right.
There were 2 pediatricians. And so, again, you're kind of in not quite as much of a frontier area, but there's a lot of stuff that you ended up doing because you didn't really have you had some sort of choice. You could load somebody up and, fly them out somewhere. But the things like, I can remember once this little kid came in and he had been on the swing set and fallen off and had chewed through about 2/3 of his tongue, and and those things we sewed them up, and took care of them there. But I have probably hundreds of stories like that. Like my son, he decided to go skiing one day. He had a spiral fracture of his tibia, and so I just at 9 or 10 at night take him over to the office and casted him there. You're always just sort of, I don't want to say you're on the edge, but I felt that all those years that I spent on the reservation and in Pinetop Lakeside were preparing me for this job.
I would think that just as being a doctor isn't for everyone, being a frontier doctor isn't for every doctor.
I would say that most, because of number one, just the demands of doing those things. Number two, the medical legal aspects of it is, and I think back on it now, and there's just, there's sometimes you're pushing a little bit.
Yeah.
You're really at your limits because either you didn't have a choice, or, well, if you don't have a choice, that's really easier to do. You don't have a choice, you just do it.
Deliver the care.
Yeah, but there's some things that you have to sit there and second guess yourself about. Would this have done better if I would have called the cavalry and called in the airplane? And
does that stuff ever weigh heavily on you? And do you ever think about those things and things that might have gone wrong?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if 99% of the stuff that you do is triumphant, it's that even less than 1%, maybe 1/10 of 1%. Those things stay with you forever.
Yeah.
And I think what saved me through all the years of doing high-risk medicine, high-risk obstetrics, what saved me was always the feeling that I have given it my best.
That's Dr. Ken Jackson. He works in family practice and obstetrics. You can reach his office at 928-692-3456. That's 692-3456. Up next is a clip from an interview with Melanie Bradle, speech-language pathologist.
The patient who's had a stroke may have aphasia, which is an impairment of language due to an injury of the brain. And so the person may have a very limited expression, so they might sound like a telegraph where just the keywords are there, but all of the other words are out. So if I wanted to say I want a drink of water and I'm a brocasophasic, I might sound like this: I water, or water. And it's just giving you the keywords, but you get the message. So that's a non-fluent type of aphasia. Versus an expressive aphasia, or a fluent type of aphasia, where someone might say dog-faced banana patch. And so the words are there, but they're not in any order that we understand, and it doesn't make any sense, but the person may think that they are making sense.
A good Steve Martin reference goes a long way with me any day, by the way.
I got a great dirty trick you can play on a 3-year-old kid. Whenever you're around him, you talk wrong. So now it's like his first day in school and he raises his hand. May I mumble dog face to the banana patch? Give that kid a special test. Get him out.
Couldn't help. I had to throw that in.
That's Melanie Bradle, speech-language pathologist at KRMC's Speech and Hearing Specialists. You can reach her office at 928-681-8717. That's 681-8717. Up next, we'll hear from Dr. Adam Braze, a thoracic surgeon.
Lung cancer is behind. I mean, in the treatment and screening of it. Mm-hmm. Breast cancer, mammograms were huge in finding cancers, and it's not the most lethal cancer. It's probably the most well known, and it has the biggest drive for prevention and awareness. Right. Lung cancer is the biggest killer, and has had very little progress. I think part of that is that, non-smokers say, well, you smoked.
You made a choice, right?
Right.
You made 40 choices a day.
Right. But that being said, in the 70s, there was advertisements that said 7 out of 10 doctors prefer Camels as their cigarettes.
What cigarette do you smoke? You'll be interested to know how the doctors of America answered that question. Tens of thousands of doctors in all parts of the country, in every state of the Union. Doctors in every branch of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" In this nationwide survey of general practitioners, surgeons, throat specialists, diagnosticians, and so on, the brand named most was Camel.
Yes, according to this survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself. Make the one sensible cigarette test. Make your own 30-day Camel mildness test in your T-zone. Smoke only Camels for 30 days. Enjoy Camel's rich, full flavor. And see how well Camels agree with your throat. Pack after pack, week after week. See for yourself why Camels are so popular with the doctors of America.
So, you get them hooked in the 70s. It's really, once you start smoking, it's hard to quit.
That's Dr. Adam Braze, thoracic surgeon at Mojave Surgical Specialists. You can reach his office at 928-681-8720. That's 681-8720. We'll be back in a moment with more of the best of Focus on Your Health. First, here is my friend, the wonderful pianist Sonny Lamson, to take us to the break.
Nous sommes heureux de vous présenter Focus on Your Health. Nous serons de retour dans un moment pour la seconde partie du programme. Vous écoutez KJazz Radio Network.
And welcome back to Focus on Your Health here on the KJazz Radio Network. This is the Best Of program, Part 1. Back in June, I loaded up the radio gear and drove down to Tucson, where I spoke with Dr. Keith Boesen. He's the director of the Arizona Poison and Drug Information Center at the University of Arizona. In this clip, we're talking about rattlesnake bites. There's usually some autobiographical reason why I want to search up a show. I've deemed this the Creepy Crawlies edition of the show.
It's a great title.
It's very scientific.
Yes, it is.
This for me is, I love to run. And I run up there in the desert, the Mojave Desert, outside of our house. And sometimes I'll have my wife take me way out into the outback and leave me, and then I'll run home. And so I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know, each summer I have a couple of close encounters with rattlesnakes. And the closest encounter I had was I nearly stepped on one. And it doesn't make sense to me to say that it was so bright that I couldn't see him, but that was the case. It was a super bright day. I guess they all are. I couldn't see this rattlesnake. And then suddenly I almost stepped on him. I think maybe he had just eaten possibly an entire semi-truck because he was about 53 feet long.
As most of the rattlesnake stories start out, huge snake crossing a 4-lane freeway, head's on one side, tail hasn't even come out the other. Yeah,
you've heard some of these before.
Yes, we've heard these tales before. Yeah,
this snake was that big at least, and he gets bigger every time I tell the story.
They all do. Yep.
But it got me to thinking. Here I am, 15 miles outside of town. If this thing bit me, what's going to happen to me, or what are my chances?
Rattlesnake venom is incredibly complex and even more so incredibly variable. One of the more common questions we get is, what's going to happen? How much time do I have? Those types of questions. And what we usually tell people, one is every rattlesnake bite, when it occurs, needs to be seen in an emergency room.
Right.
And so if that means you are 2 minutes away from the emergency room, you go in 2 minutes. If you are 2 hours away, then you go in 2 hours. It's always the as soon as possible.
Okay.
Now, as far as what will happen with rattlesnakes, because of that variability in their venom, we have seen snakes bite a human being and nothing happens, meaning they bit you, but they did not inject any venom.
Okay.
To the other extreme, which we have seen people die from a result of a rattlesnake bite.
Mm-hmm. So
from nothing to death is possible. Most people fall in the middle.
Okay.
Where you can have more immediately kind of a local injury, refer to it. So the way to think about rattlesnake bites is they can cause one of 3 things primarily. One is local injury. So you get a lot of swelling. You can get some bruising in the area, some blisters, even some necrosis where the skin tissue starts to die. Another part of the venom can cause bleeding problems. So your blood becomes thin is the easiest way to describe it. So you have difficulty clotting. And then a third part, which is a little more rare, but we have seen definitely in Arizona, is a neurologic type symptom where you get these neurotoxicities where your muscles can start to kind of, it's called fasciculations, but it's almost, if you looked at it, like a bunch of worms under the skin.
Wow.
And that can lead to breathing problems. Now, with rattlesnakes in the desert in Arizona, you can have any or all of those combination of things. It all depends on the type of snake and where that snake lived that got you.
That's Dr. Keith Boesen, director of the Arizona Poison and Drug Information Center at the University of Arizona in Tucson. You can reach poison control at 1-800-222-1222. That's 1-800-222-1222. Next, we'll visit with Dr. Justin Garrison. He's a family practice resident at KRMC. In this clip, he looks back on his college years and talks about the difficulties of balancing academics and athletics. You did your undergrad in Utah, is that correct?
Correct, at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah.
Uh-huh. And so when you entered Weber State, did you have a major declared?
Well, right when I started at Weber State, it was pre-medical science was my major.
But you found out actually that you were just majoring in football, right?
Yeah, that was one of the things I learned very quick.
All right, so tell me about it.
In high school, I was very good in football. I was a star athlete. I got recruited by a lot of colleges.
What position, by the way?
I played running back.
Okay.
One of the selling points for Weber State University was a strong pre-medical program, plus being able to play college football, let alone play in the Big Sky Conference that plays Northern Arizona 2 times a year. So I'll be able to play in front of family and friends.
Yeah.
So they really kind of sold me on that. Within my first month at Weber State University, I realized that it was too good to be true.
Okay.
I love playing football. I love the experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But it was very difficult being able to balance playing college football, Division I level, and taking 15, 18 credit hours for pre-med.
Let's see. So I don't mean to play into a jock stereotype, but I'm going to guess that your teammates, there weren't a whole lot that were majoring in pre-med.
No, most of my teammates, if they did have a major, it was more like physical education.
Right.
Not to down physical education, but that's what they chose. And a lot of them, it's a shame, didn't even get a degree when their education was paid for as a great opportunity to really set them up for life. They really just focused on football. If I remember correctly, my first semester at Weber State, my classes were football, intro to the university, library, and a speech.
Wow.
All the classes were taught by football boosters.
Wow.
You really didn't have to go to class at all if you didn't want to. That's when I really kind of realized this might not be the best program for me, be the best option. It was a great experience, but at that time I knew if I wanted to get into medical school, this just wasn't going to happen.
These courses and these instructors, they knew, the guy, he was practicing late. He had to get up early and run or hit the weights or something like that. So they let the athletes slide. Right?
Yes, they did. And I remember the first semester I signed up for it. I was on scholarship, so I just went with the flow. In the second semester, that's when my concern was really high because second semester is not even football season. Yes, you have practice, you weight train and work on conditioning, but it's not football season. That's when I felt like I can sign up for the more advanced classes, your chemistries, the bio. And I remember signing up for those classes, and right when spring practice started, February, March, my head coach called me into his office and asked me, why did I sign up for those classes? And I had to remind him, I wanted to go pre-med, I wanted to get into medical school.
Yeah.
And he told me, I'm on scholarship. This is a business. They're paying for my school. I would need to reevaluate, my future.
Wow.
He actually offered to take me out of classes and put me in some easier classes in middle of the semester, and I would get really good grades in those classes, but I couldn't take the biologies, the chemistries, because it interfered with spring practice. Because in the spring, that's when you have spring practice, and with chemistry, you have 3-4 hour labs in the afternoon besides the 1 hour class, and it was just interfering with practice. And that's when I really knew that my future in football was more than likely going to be over, and that's when I really threw everything into getting into medical school.
That's Dr. Justin Garrison, family practice resident at KRMC. You can reach him through the resident clinic, 928-681-8701. That's 681-8701. Next up is an excerpt from my conversation with Kathleen Burns. She's a pediatric nurse practitioner at Joshua Tree Pediatrics. Now, Kathleen, I know you joined us, what's been not quite a year, right?
10 months ago.
So I
moved to Kingman. Mm-hmm.
That's right. This is your first summer here.
It is.
So put on your headphones. We're going to go for a little walk in the rain.
Excellent.
This is from a little bit earlier in the summer. And when these massive storms hit town, you've seen it, right?
I've experienced it. It's amazing.
It is an amazing storm, and then the water comes from all the high ground and rushes down, and it seems to all end up in that park at the intersection of Eastern and Southern. Now, the longtime locals refer to that little park as the Green Hole.
Yes. I just learned that.
Uh-huh. And I understand that this summer you also saw what happens when that hole gets flooded.
Yeah. It was, I'll be honest, it was very disturbing to see children swimming in there. I know they were having fun, and I know it was a great time.
Yeah.
But all I could think about was all the runoff that was coming from down the hill that was full of feces, possibly, urine from some of the animals, different chemicals. That area, too, is probably sprayed with all kinds of pesticides.
Yeah.
Dogs do their
Horses,
business,
maybe,
and
they're up
horses
there.
from up further on the hill.
If you're listening to this outside of Kingman, this is really something to behold, this park. It's, I don't know, maybe I'd compare it to about a football field. And I don't know, probably after a big storm, the water could be 3 feet deep.
3 or 4 feet deep.
I mean, 4 feet maybe, yeah. After that storm, I loaded up the radio gear and I went down to the park. And the water comes rushing so hard down the mountain that what you're hearing now is actually the sound of water racing into the park. And as is custom, now that the storm is cleared and the water's rushing in, people from all over the neighborhood come, and trucks pull up and kids run out and they've got their floaties. And this particular night there was a boat out in the park.
It did look exciting.
Yeah, it does look like fun.
And looked like a lot of fun, but I couldn't help but to think about all the bacteria and viruses. And
you're not going to spoil the fun, though.
No.
Okay, yeah, you will spoil the fun. Are you telling me there are some potential health risks here?
There are. One I can think of in particular is leptospirosis, which is a spirochete, which is a type of bacteria that is found in contaminated urine. We don't see it too much in this country, but there is the potential for that to happen. And what happens is the urine becomes infected, and then it goes into the water, groundwater, and in this case it would rush down the hill and go into the green hole. And if a child has a cut on their foot or any open area, they can come in contact with this. And it can be pretty serious. Some of the side effects are high fever, headache, chills, muscle aches, vomiting, jaundice.
Oh, dear.
Abdominal pain. So, it's one thing to keep in mind when the children especially are playing with their skin exposed in that area. Absolutely, it has a potential to affect kids.
This is the part of this that bothers me because it looks like so much fun.
I know.
It's any kid's dream to have the park you usually play in suddenly filled with water. You have a huge swimming pool. What's there not to love about that?
And I'm sure most of the children are pretty happy and healthy after they've experienced this. But as a healthcare practitioner, I can't help but think about all the hazards that it might cause.
Is part of being a healthcare practitioner just ruining everybody's good time?
Thank you. Yeah.
That's Kathleen Burns, pediatric nurse practitioner at Joshua Tree Pediatrics. You can reach her office at 928-681-8706. That's 681-8706. And that's this week's show. That's the best of Focus on Your Health Part 1. Please join me next week for Part 2. It'll be just as much fun, I promise. I'm T.G. LaFredo. Thanks a lot for listening. And we'll catch you next Saturday at 11:30 a.m. right here on the K-Jazz Radio Network.
Vous écoutez Focus on Your Health. Nous serons... Maybe not.